Teaching is where you present information. Learning is where you retain information with context that lets you use it later. If you assume your information is useful, what determines whether or not your teaching becomes learning? In prior sessions, we talked about how the brain learns and different sensory modalities it uses to take in information. The big missing piece is attention. The brain is always taking in more information than it can use. And there's a finite amount of space in executive memory for short-term storage and processing. You can also only do one thing effectively at a time, regardless of what you might have heard about multitasking. Finally, there's the process of consolidation to consider. This is where things go from short-term memory to long-term memory. This takes repetition and time to work. The process of allocating your mental resources is through attention. This is the brain's volume control, how much information is actually getting through. We know that attention is positively mediated by motivation as well as relating to the information. Does your student know how this information is going to be useful? Attention naturally decreases over time. It also is negatively regulated by students being overwhelmed or frustrated. So what you need to do is design a lesson that engages and directs the student's attention. You need to present information without going past capacity. You need to engage the brain with different modalities and provide repetition, context, and breaks to allow consolidation into long-term memory. It's easy to get sidetracked or to try to do too much, which is why you need to have a plan in advance. There are 5 steps to building an effective lesson plan. Who will be in the class? What are their needs? Brainstorm topics you know they'll benefit from. Ask for their input if you can. Do they have the necessary pre-skills or foundational knowledge? Where is this class being held? Do they have expectations because of that? So is this at a practice where they expect to have lots of sparring? Is this at an event where they won't have gear, so you won't be able to do full contact drills or sparring? Pick your overall focus or theme and 1 to 3 learning objectives. My favorite is to build around a core concept such as measure or tempo. Search for resources related to your topic, including manuscripts and drills. If you see a play from a manual, but you haven't done it before, interpret it from the source beforehand with a friend. If you want to do a complex action, figure out how to break it into component parts. Design drills to practice each of the fundamental actions individually. Then, plan to bring them together to build in complexity to reach your final goal. Shoot for no more than 1/3 of the time talking or 1/3 of the time sparring. I recommend that you have no more than 1 topic per hour and no more than 3 to 4 activities on that topic. You need to allocate enough time for each drill for repetition in order to create motor memory.
Classes or practices can be much more than lecturing, simple 2-person drills, or sparring. I built a table of activities you can choose from. It's organized from left to right, with increasing complexity for what is required from the student. From top to bottom, it goes from instructor-driven teaching to student-driven learning. For class planning, I allocate 10 to 20 minutes per activity. In general, I work from left to right and top to bottom during a class, where the student becomes progressively more engaged with the material and the learning process. You will use more activities from the left of the chart for inexperienced students and more from the right for advanced students. Let's go through the activities. In the lecture track, you could give a technique or a history lecture. You could discuss the manual, or you could have a question and answer segment. For the solo track, you can use modeling. This is where the instructor demonstrates and the student repeats. You can have the student execute the technique and receive feedback. Or you can have the student watch and analyze video of their fighting. You also have partner drills. For a partner drill, the instructor demonstrates the action and then the students drill together. You can also have students demonstrate the drills to other students. And finally, you can interpret a new play from the manual. For complex partner drills, you can do chaining. This is where the instructor demonstrates a series of actions and the students integrate them. You can do permutations, where the student learns an action and then makes minor changes to learn about cause and effect. And finally, you can do decision trees. The student learns multiple different responses to the same action and then in the moment has to choose the best one. And for the sparring track, you can do coaching, where you give instructor or group feedback. You can do something objective-based, so the student has a specific challenge, for instance, using a specific technique. And finally, you have open sparring.
A class has 3 parts: introduction, activities, wrap-up. Start by establishing student buy-in and therefore attention. Circle up to welcome students and share the learning objectives. Begin with introductions. This gets the students used to contributing to the discussion and gets them more comfortable with each other. You can also use this to gauge skills before you begin. Gauge the responses to when you present your learning objectives. Do they understand what you're talking about, or do they look lost already? Does somebody look uncomfortable with what you have planned? They might have a training challenge, such as a history or a disability, that you need to speak with them privately about. So check in with them when you can. Run 3 to 4 learning activities for about 50 minutes. If you're doing a longer class, break for water at least once per hour. Games are also a way to practice pre-skills with you have newer students, youth, or students who need to focus on non-sparring objectives, such as learning pre-skills. Some games you could use are footwork with Simon Says, partner tag to learn measure, target practice, or learning to defend yourself against safe objects. Close by coming back together. Review the learning objectives. Connect what they learned to that objective. Leave a couple of minutes for questions, discussions about what they learned, how they're going to apply it, and giving you feedback on your instruction. To help you make good plans, you should build your teaching experience. For your first lesson, do a short 30 to 60 minute focused plan and start by running it with a group of people you're familiar with. Record their questions and their feedback. Run it 2 to 3 times and make adjustments before you run it with students you've never encountered before. Start with an informal environment, such as a local practice. Build your skills on that one class before you start trying to teach a lot of new material. Practice giving quality feedback in a one-on-one environment before leading an entire class. Adapting to students who are either more or less experienced than you were expecting is easiest if you begin the class by checking in and setting expectations. Slowing down and needing to teach pre-skills is the most frequent adaptation you're going to need. Know in advance what activities you're going to get rid of so that you can make more time for these fundamental activities. If you're adapting to a more advanced group, you can move more quickly through the drills and then add in applications of either focused sparring or more advanced drills. You can also add in group feedback. So you can ramp up the individual drill difficulty by providing more resistance, although you have to make sure that they're avoiding breaking the drill by either anticipating or countering the action. So this might look like more speed, smaller invitations, allowing for less mechanical advantage. Use drills that build on fundamental knowledge with more challenges. Add in decision trees or chain together actions, such as beginning with an invitation in order to actually create the opening that you need. If you have a mixed group, you can pair inexperienced students with more advanced students. But make sure that you still give your experienced students feedback from circulating instructors. Switch partners between drills for this. In a group that has a big experience disparity, you have to focus on the needs of the majority. Try to make sure that you're spending some time with the other students as well. Alternatively, you can divide your class time. Use the first half to have advanced students help teach more fundamental actions to your newer students. And then for the second half, focus on the advanced students with drilling and sparring, and either have the new students watch or work on the side with a co-instructor. In short, design lessons to engage student attention and allocate time to learn and retain new information. Use a range of activities to engage students, including lecture, solo work, partner drills, and sparring applications. Keep in mind you can use activities that are either instructor-driven or student-driven. Remember to talk about your learning objectives at both the beginning and the end. And finally, adapt as needed to the experience level of your students. Thanks for listening.